Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here, and I'm happy to be able to actually make a video today because about a week and a half ago or so, my computer just died. Stopped working, wouldn't turn on at all. Fortunately, I was able to figure out what's wrong with it. I had to order a part, and it came in, and I was able to get it working again. So hopefully it stays that way. But yeah, I've not been able to make videos or play DDO or do anything else on my computer, or use it at all for the past couple weeks or so. Anyways, this video is going to be about an interesting thread that I found on the forums. It's a new player posted some really good, I think, legitimate criticisms of DDO from a new player's perspective. So this is a player who just recently started playing DDO, and he's talking here about some of the biggest issues he ran into. I agree with a lot of these. Some of these I don't agree, but I think it's worth going through and talking about because it's a really good post, and it's long, but again, it's really good. So I'm going to go through it all. So this video is probably going to be a little bit longer, but it's worth it, believe me. So let's go ahead and get started. And this is what he had to say, and he had a lot of positive things to say about DDO too. This isn't just an all critical thread or anything. So this is what he had to say. First, I want to say that this is truly a wonderful game with an incredible amount of complexity and depth, and a puzzle MMO to boot that seems quite rare and difficult to make well. So it's a good game, and I do not regret paying for a 3-month sub, even if I may not continue playing with my friends past April 30th when the free content ends. And the vast majority of players I run into have been nothing but supportive and helpful, always eager to stop and share, teach, and carry, which I think is true. I mean, players in DDO definitely very, very willing to do that, from my experience. It seems like to be an older and more mature. It seems like an older and more mature community, and that's been really refreshing. Considering games like Dota 2 and others have inherently toxic communities. So it's even more sad that people only seem to hear of this awesome game by word of mouth, and it's hard to get people to stick around. Anyways, despite some of us playing quite a bit this past month, here are some reasons why the majority of my group of friends, us gamers who have played together for the last 15 years, sadly probably won't keep going. So the first thing he has listed here is the VIP subscription and its limitations, which he says feels exploitative. And I will say VIP definitely has some issues, and I'm definitely some. You can argue a lot whether it's worth it or not, and whether some things be included. But anyways, this is what he had to say. He said, "This is the biggest turnoff for my friends who have been enjoying the month of free content, and were on the fence but haven't yet paid for VIP, as I have, is that the VIP subscription model they have still doesn't give access to all content. I feel this could have been much more appealing to potential new customers, even if you somehow charged a bit more per month for access to all content, or at least put together different packages." So I think that's a legit criticism. I mean, VIP, it is misleading a bit for brand new players coming in who don't really understand that VIP doesn't include all content, and it also doesn't even include all races. So it doesn't include everything. When you hear VIP, a lot of players assume, and this player did apparently at first, that VIP would give you everything, but it doesn't. So obviously, with the expansions, DDO, the SSG has to do what they got to do to keep the game going, to make enough money, to meet their financial goals. It's just the way it is. And expansions, whether you like it or not, them being a thing that everyone has to buy has just been kind of a thing that has been established already in the gaming market, that expansions are an addition to the base content and everyone has to pay extra for them. I think there is some things they could do, but there has to be some kind of way to leverage and even out, giving players a good option, but also letting SSG stay profitable. They got to make money, and they want to be able to somehow earn more money out of their most loyal players, when it comes to content. So that's really why expansions cost more. I mean, it's to make money. That's why they make everyone pay for it. And it's something that, as I said before, the gaming community, the gaming culture, I guess, around MMOs or really a lot of other games, it's something that people have been willing to pay for. I think maybe there should be another tier, perhaps. Maybe there's some other way we can kind of leverage this out. Maybe we should have a super VIP tier, some kind of tier above VIP. Maybe you get access to everything. So all races, all expansions, all content. Maybe have another couple perks on top of that. In exchange, you get to pay. You have to pay a little bit more. So that way, SSG gets something for it. The players get something for it. It could be kind of a compromise. I think that might be a good idea. And this is something that he referenced here when he says maybe pay a bit more per month for access to all content. Maybe they could do something like that. Maybe they could make expansions free to all VIPs after a year or something. Although I don't know financially if that would be a good idea for them, because you have to realize, guys, that they're not going to, if there's not the financial incentive to make for them to make an expansion, they're not going to make an expansion. So you can't just say, oh well, VIPs are already VIP, they should get all the expansions too just for free for nothing. Well, no, guys. I mean, what's going to happen is if you take that stance, they're just not going to make expansions, because the point of expansions, obviously the point is to they want to make good content for the game and do these epic kind of expansions, but the main point of those is to make money. I mean, they're business. So if they're not going to make extra money doing an expansion, why would they make an expansion? Why wouldn't they just keep spitting out adventure packs, which is what they did after Menace of the Underdark and Shadowfell, because there was a big gap there before we had another expansion. So that's really the kind of business route they took, was just to make adventure packs, and that's what they'd go back to if they couldn't charge extra for them. So there has to be some kind of give and a take here. So I think some kind of extra tier on top of VIP that includes all races, all VIP, and maybe a couple other little perks would be a good idea. Anyways, let's get back to his comment. He says it's really off-putting to newer players because with this system, because then the burden of figuring out whether they have enough points or are better off choosing buying certain expansions or packages, or whether it would be worth it to just grind limited slots and characters for enough points. That falls entirely on them. So that can be confusing, because I feel like at the beginning of your DDO experience, whenever you start playing, you really need to pick one route. You're either going to go VIP or you're going to go premium. And if you go the premium route, which is what I chose, is you're going to buy everything and have it permanently. Whereas if you go VIP, you're going to get some other extra VIP only perks in exchange for, you're going to pay more in the long run. Now, if you only play for a year or two, you'll pay less with VIP, I would say. But if you go with if you play this game for years and years and years, you're going to pay more if you go VIP over premium. But it can be confusing, and I made a video not a while ago, kind of doing the math on that. It's called Should You Go, I think, what did I call it? I think Should You Go VIP or Premium? So you can check that video out. I'll just link it below if you want to check that out. But there is math you can do to try to figure out which is the most worth it. But he says this is just another thing that basically makes the game more complex for new players. So he says this is already a game that is very difficult for new players to pick up, and it feels like we're back in college with all the Wikipedia and reading we have to do to figure out mechanics and interactions already, but then it's being reduced to something like a cost-benefit analysis of VIP versus premium, and that's something this player doesn't want to do. And yeah, I can understand why that would be annoying. So he references there that there's already so much to learn. And that's one thing I think it's easy as veteran players to lose perspective of just how insanely difficult this game is to learn. I mean, for new players, the learning curve is just astronomical. I mean, it took me, I feel like I really have a good understanding of DDO. And it took me, there's a lot of things I don't understand or don't know very well. And I've been playing this game for over a decade. And it helps a little bit if you played pen and paper. But if you've not played pen and paper, man, it's so hard to understand all the little intricacies of DDO. And then you get into past lives and reincarnation and epic destinies. And there's just so much to learn. All the crafting systems, there's just so much to learn. But anyways, let's continue. So he says, for some of us who had played a bit more this past month, we've done enough to know that expansions like Ravenloft and Sharn are not only new and good content, but have vastly better gear than just about anything else we could casually find from group quests without target farming or grinding. Like we know, heroic Ravenloft gear is good enough to carry us to 20 and a bit beyond, and Sharn takes care of the rest, and that these two are also comprise much of the end game. So he says, with this knowledge in mind, these feel less like optional adventure or expansion packs and more like things we're going to have to get anyways. Except somehow with a submodel we don't, and we feel kind of baited in. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I really agree with that. I mean, it's, again, I think it's okay that the expansions are the have the best gear, and it's not just the expansions that have good gear. I mean, the most recent adventure packs as well have excellent gear. Although it's true that Sharn and Ravenloft have the best gear, so I can see where that's kind of frustrating. But at the same time, those expansions, if they're going to go with an expansion system, they're going to charge all this money, they really have to have the best gear in the game. If you're going to do power creep, which you have to do, if you're not going to do it in expansions, it's just like, what? Like, when are you going to do it? So I don't know. I understand where he's coming from, but I don't know if I really agree that it's unreasonable. Of course, he's not really saying that, I guess, but I don't think it's unreasonable for them to include power creep in those expansions. Okay, let's get into number 2 here, which I think is one of the biggest issues new players have, which is, as he explains, the power creep and separation between players is gargantuan in a game in which the sheer amount of knowledge already acts as a huge barrier to overcome. And then he says, when you're a newer player and find a competent group to play with for the first time, it's like tasting the forbidden fruit. Here I am, limping into a decent, heroic Ravenloft pug for the first time with my 200 HP and 28 point first life awfulness, and I see people with 5 times my hit points destroying everything. He says half the group is literally so strong, fast, knows the quest that it's possible for them to finish the Reaper quest without me actually seeing or touching a single monster. And then he kind of goes on and explains this more. But yeah, the main point here is that, power creep between newer players and veteran players is huge, and it gets more extreme every year. You know, the more new stuff they introduce, and the more new past lies, the more new gear, all that stuff, it gets strong, bigger and bigger. And I understand why that's frustrating from a new player, but on this one, I kind of don't disagree that it's really a problem in this way, in the way that, here's the thing, they have to continue to give the veteran players power. They can't only cater to new players. They have to reward veteran players for putting in years and years of work on their characters by giving them reasons to do that. You know, no one would reincarnate if you couldn't gain a little bit of power from it. You know, no one would grind gear if it wasn't good and made you powerful. The more time you put into the game should equate to a better character. That makes sense. So I understand why that's frustrating for new players, but I don't know that it's really an issue with the game design, because, again, their core players and the ones spending the most money are going to be their veteran players, and they really have to cater to them. So I understand why that's frustrating, and you can argue about things like Reaper, for example, and I'm not saying that all power creep is okay and that they haven't gone too far. I mean, they clearly have gone too far with power creep at times in the game, particularly with with Reaper mode. I think Reaper mode was a thing that the game needed and was good, but I do think they went a little overboard with how much reward you get from it. I think that particularly the hit point bonuses that you get outside of Reaper, that benefit you in all difficulties, not just in Reaper difficulty, just went too far. I mean, that's an insane amount of survivability you get from just getting, 20, 30 Reaper points. And it's so good that you really feel like you have to play Reaper for that. And it really makes a big difference. But I would say, as a new player, it can be shocking to come in and go into a public group, and be totally carried and feel like you're useless. And for that reason, I have to say that you really have to, as a new player, I think, and it's sad to say that it's to this point, but I think it's kind of inevitable with a game this old that power creep eventually gets wider and wider between your veteran players and your new players. What new players really need to do at this point is either two things: either play the game with your real life friends, get a handful of friends to play with you, and that's what I think is the best experience. If you're a new player playing DDO, you should definitely do that. Or if you don't have friends, a lot of real life friends who want to play the game with you, you can go on either DDO.com forums or the DDO Reddit, places like that. Those are probably the two best ones, and just basically post and say, hey, I want to play with a group at this time on these days, and who wants to play with me? I'm going to be a brand new player, and I want to play with new characters. Who wants to play with me? And I bet you'll get plenty of people joining you, because one thing that DDO has is a major lack of leaders, people that want to start groups, really be leaders and run groups and raids, and not just raids, but static groups and things like that. So from my experience, if you actually post and say that, hey, I want to run this, that start a new character who wants to level with me, you're probably going to get a bunch of players willing to join you. So yeah, so do one of those two things, and then always soloing is always an option. Although, while I actually solo a lot more these days, but it is an option. Although I don't think you're getting the whole experience if you only solo. You should, I think you should play with players, at least some other players, at least some, and of course you can't raid by yourself generally. I mean, there's some raids you can solo, but anyways, I'm getting a little off topic. Let's continue with what he has to say here. Okay, let's see. I don't think I need to read all of this. Okay, he goes, but for many of us who want to see and experience as much content as possible, including late game and large groups raids, it presents a real conundrum, and he's referring again to there being such a big gap between new players and veteran players. It's infinitely more efficient to get carried in group, yet you soon discover that these players have dozens to hundreds of lives played on their characters. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so with being carried, it is more efficient, but really that comes down to I guess what you're looking to get out of the game. Yeah, if you just want to level and get carried, sure, and there's players willing to do that, you can do that. You can totally do that. And it is a lot more efficient to play in groups. But are you really having fun doing that? Because being carried isn't fun. It's cool to get, really easy XP if groups are willing to carry you, but I think you're going to get burnt out if you do that, because you can't do that all the time, right? You want to learn the game, and there's going to be plenty of times in game where you can't get carried. You need to actually, play a role at some point. So I don't know that that's really an effective thing to do. It may be effective in the short term, but definitely not the long term. You need to learn the quests. You need to build a good character. If you actually want to find people to consistently run like higher difficulty stuff with. And that ability to feel burdened or left out, which he talks about here, again, is only a temporary thing. So if you are getting carried, you should, either run, you should be working up to being more powerful, or you should, drop down. And if you're running, say, like a mid-range build or something, like a mid-range power build, then, play with in a way that's more, play lower difficulties anyways. You shouldn't be, wanting to get carried on Reaper 10 if you're, if you're running, say, a build that really shouldn't be in Reaper. So then he talked about today he walked into a Slayer area where someone 2 levels below me had literally 10 times the HP that I did. Yeah, that can happen. It's pretty crazy, although that's probably has to be an extreme circumstance, unless you're like really you're running like a drow like rogue or something, and you've dumped Constitution. So you can probably fix that with make up a lot of that with better building your character better. But anyways, so then he talks about Reaper difficulty, which I've mentioned a little bit already. So he says Reaper difficulty in the XP curve feels like a catch-22 that funnels people towards pay to win. Because I took the forbidden fruit of being carried, even joining a group where some people went out of their way to be helpful with advice, mechanics, and outright dragging me through some lives, my secondary character is now a 3rd life TR. However, there is now a huge wall where I basically need to complete Reaper quests to get half decent XP for anything. Okay, very much disagree with that. I don't know why people say this all the time in the game. People always say like, oh, we have to run Reaper because the XPs, because we need to get decent XP. No, you can get great XP running Elite. I don't understand why people, I hear this all the time on the forums, and I don't agree at all. You can level just fine on Elite. People leveled on Elite for years. Reaper is somewhat new to DDO still. So, no, you don't have to run Reaper to get decent XP. If your goal is to just run past lives, like especially heroic past lives, you don't need to run Reaper. You can just run Elite. In fact, if you're running a build, like it sounds like this guy is, that's not really a great build and you're not very experienced, you don't have the quest, then it's probably more efficient for you to run Elite because you're going to go really slow on Reaper unless you're getting carried, but you don't need to, like, that's a choice. I don't agree with this. Like, you totally can level great on Elite. So I think he's just wrong there. I mean, the idea that that elite XP is not half decent. It's just I think that's just totally wrong. Okay, and then he continues. Surely it's my fault that I didn't learn some of these quests as well as I should have, but I basically don't have a choice anymore. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Um, he said he doesn't have a choice but to only do or hold out for Reaper. Sure, these are not unreasonable expectations for players who would normally gone through a few lives already, but it further limits the ability and appeal of groups you can join. Many classes do not fare well soloing Reaper. And biggest of all, you need a lot of Reaper XP to do better at Reaper. But like I mentioned before, you do. I understand the argument that the Reaper stuff is so good, the Reaper rewards with the HP is so good that you kind of do have to do Reaper. And I do think there's an issue with there being kind of this. There's kind of this wall where like you hit a point where Elite's easy, but you don't have Reaper points, and you're really like weak in Reaper. And there's a point there where I feel like players like feel like they need to get carried, and this is probably what this guy's referring to here. He doesn't have like a great, a lot of Reaper points yet, and it can be pain in the butt because your character gets a lot better after you get like 20 Reaper points or something and get all that HP. So yeah, I kind of understand that frustration because at some point you do need to dive in and do Reaper, whether you want to run Reaper or not, just because whether your end goal is to run Reaper regularly or not, because again, those rewards are so good. And that's one thing I agree with, and one thing I think that the devs really screwed up is that they made the Reaper rewards just too good. Not saying there shouldn't have been any rewards for Reaper that affect you in all difficulties, but I think they went a little bit too far with them. Okay, let's see. Let's just go down to number 4. And he says, 4, the game doesn't seem to cater to new players at all. Okay. I'm sure the reasons for this may be crystal clear to those of you who have been around. Many games eventually reach a retention, milk the whales phase where there's not much expectation of continuing to build a player base. If that's the case here, then it's regrettable because this is a truly amazing game that I've never heard of without word of mouth, and one I wouldn't have enjoyed to a fraction of the extent I do without the kindness and helpfulness of the community. I feel like he puts this kind of a negative light because, yeah, DDO is at a point where, and all games eventually reach a point where they're not going to be growing too much. I mean, exponential growth for a game is just not, or uninterrupted growth is just not going to happen. All games reach a point where they hit a peak, then level off or decline, and it's just the way it is. It's just the fact of having a game that's this old. So would we all like it if DDO was growing? Sure, but it's not, and games just don't work that way. And then he continues and says, my friends felt just as I do that the amount of research and looking things up was like being back in school again, and that's only enough to just scratch the surface. Sure, some of this is a positive. Many gamers don't want their hands held, and there are challenging puzzles and decisions. Blah, 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 blah. But yeah, he talks about just how complex the game is, basically. And that's true, but like I mentioned before, there's a give and a take. All that complexity keeps the veteran players in the game, while it is a problem with new players. There are certainly things they can do. I think a lot of things are just poorly explained in game. Like some of those, for example, is like when they make a new content pack, like there's no way. Do they put it in the launcher? I don't think they do. I mean, there's no way to know. Like I can't tell you the number of players every update where there's new content. You have to go on the forum and say, okay, how do I get to the quest? I mean, you don't even know how to get to the quest. There's certain things they don't explain. I think the devs have reached a point where they kind of expect that people read the forums, because especially a lot of the conversation, a lot of the announcements and things, they're on the forums. And if you don't read the forums, you aren't really informed of a lot of different things. So, and there's a lot of things that could be explained better, particularly Korthos. There's no in-game guide. They probably feel they don't need to do that because there's the wiki. But it would be better if the game did a better job of explaining a lot of the different systems in the game and just basic stuff. Like I made a video called Axel's DDO New Player Guide, I think I called it, where I've explained a lot of basic things, just like what a tavern is, how a tavern works, what a bank is, how banks work, what a general vendor is, what a hireling is, things like that the game just doesn't explain at all. And it would be great if there were things that actually explained that in the game. But it just doesn't. There's so many things you really need to read the wiki to understand the game. And I'm not saying that the game should hold your hand through everything, but it should do a little bit more, particularly for new players, particularly in Korthos and in the marketplace as well. I'm just explaining these basic things. So yeah, guys, I think that overall, this is a pretty good post. I mean, he makes um, a lot of legitimate complaints here. But overall, I would say that, as I mentioned before, if you're a new player, what you want to do is start a static group, get a group of friends to play with you, and don't worry so much about catching up to the veteran players. If I were to jump into DDO today, I would just want to run through a few lives or run a few characters up to cap. Don't worry about other players. As far as the money goes, you can get up to level 30 fairly cheaply. You need to be patient though. There's a lot of free content. That's one of the really good things that DDO does do is there's so much free content, especially the first 15 or so levels. It does trail off after that, but you can make just a few purchases and really experience the game for not a whole lot. Like, you don't have to buy VIP. If you wait for sales, you can get the expansions for what, like $15, 10, $15, and some you don't even really need to buy anymore. Especially Shadowfell, you don't need to buy. Sharn, you should buy, and Ravenloft as well if you want to reincarnate. But the others you really don't. I guess Menace of the Underdark, you don't really have to buy it. The content and gear is outdated, but you don't need it to level really. Although you do want to be able to get to Evening Star and have the Evening Star key and all that stuff. So maybe buy Menace of the Underdark, but you can get all these on sale for really cheap. And I even did in that video I mentioned before where I said the VIP versus premium video, you can get all the content in the game. If you just want to buy all the content, you can get it even if you don't. Even if you only wait for a bonus point sale for like what, $300, if that. So if you plan to stick around for a long time, it's not really that much to buy in terms of money. I mean, especially if you play this game for years, $300 on a game that you play for 5 years, totally good investment of entertainment for your money spent. So yeah, guys, I think that's going to be it. If you have any other comments, feel free to post that below, and I would be interested in reading that if you have any kind of reaction to this post. But yeah, guys, that's going to be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Have a good one, and take care.